Thanksgiving had always been a complex tapestry woven with laughter and hidden tensions, each thread representing unspoken feelings and long-held grudges. This year felt particularly charged, like the air was thick with unsaid words and unresolved conflicts waiting to unfold at the dinner table. I stood nervously in my son's home, surrounded by the cheerful banter of family and friends, my heart racing as I clutched the gift I had spent weeks choosing for Ethan, a token of my love, a piece of my heart wrapped in paper. But as I handed it to him, his reaction sent shockwaves through the room. "This is ridiculous," he scoffed, his voice dripping with sarcasm, shattering my hopes in an instant. It was a moment that would forever alter our relationship, revealing the fragile lines that had formed between us over the years. Before I dive deeper into this emotional roller coaster, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like the video to support my channel. Thanksgiving had always been a delicate dance in our family, a choreography of smiles masking old wounds and unspoken grievances. But this year felt different, heavier somehow, like the air itself was thick with anticipation and unspoken words waiting to spill over the table. I was standing in the center of my son's sleek, modern kitchen, surrounded by the laughter and chatter of relatives who barely noticed the tension simmering beneath my carefully composed smile. My name is Marissa Langley, and at 54, I'd learned that family gatherings often reveal more beneath the surface than any therapist's office could. My son, Ethan, was the centerpiece of this gathering, not just because it was his home, but because his mood set the tone for everyone else. He had always been proud, ambitious, with a sharp wit that could cut through any conversation like a knife. But today, that wit was aimed squarely at me. The moment I handed him the gift, the one I'd spent weeks carefully choosing and preparing, his eyes flickered with something I hadn't expected: contempt. The wrapping paper was simple, but inside was something I hoped would speak to the man he was becoming, something meaningful, something that said I saw him beyond the busy executive and the son who sometimes forgot to call. "I don't know why you even bother, Mom," Ethan said, his voice laced with sarcasm as he tore into the package. "This is so pointless." His words landed like a slap, sharp and cold, sending a ripple of surprise through the room. The chatter died down for a moment, all eyes shifting to us, waiting to see how I'd respond. I swallowed the sting of his dismissal, feeling heat rise to my cheeks despite my best efforts to remain composed. The gift was a beautifully bound journal, leather-covered, with his initials embossed on the front. Inside, I had written a letter, words meant to remind him of his dreams, his struggles, and the strength I'd always believed he carried even when he couldn't see it himself. But Ethan didn't see any of that. To him, it was just another pointless gesture from a mother who didn't understand the world he navigated every day. His wife, Claire, sitting beside him, smirked knowingly, her eyes glinting with the same dismissiveness that now clouded Ethan's expression. "Maybe you should stick to something useful next time," Ethan continued, his voice rising just enough to make sure everyone heard. "Stocks, bonds, something that matters." The jab wasn't just at the gift, it was at me, at my place in his life, at the history we shared and the distance that had grown between us over the years. I felt a familiar ache settle deep in my chest, the kind that comes from realizing that the person you raised doesn't see you the way you imagined he would. Around the table, family members exchanged uneasy glances. My sister tried to change the subject, and my father cleared his throat, but the damage was done. The room had shifted, the warmth replaced by a cold undercurrent of tension and disappointment. As the evening wore on, I found myself retreating into a quiet corner, watching Ethan engage with others as if nothing had happened, his laughter loud and easy, his eyes bright with amusement at some private joke I wasn't part of. I felt invisible, an outsider in my own family, overshadowed by his success and the sharp edges of his disdain. That night, lying awake in the guest room, I replayed the moment over and over. His words echoed in my mind, each repetition a fresh wound. How had we come to this? When had the son I once held as a newborn become a stranger who mocked my efforts and dismissed my love? But beneath the hurt, a flicker of something else stirred, a quiet resolve. I wasn't the woman who would allow herself to be cast aside so easily. There was a story behind that journal, a meaning Ethan hadn't glimpsed, and a surprise yet to come that would make him reconsider everything he thought he knew about me. The next morning, the house was filled with the smell of brewing coffee and the soft murmur of early risers. I moved through the rooms with a calm purpose, carefully tucking away the journal and the letter inside my bag. No one noticed the slight smile that touched my lips, a promise to myself that this Thanksgiving would not end in silence and regret. Ethan remained oblivious to the quiet storm gathering beneath my calm exterior. As he chatted with his friends, boasting about his latest promotion and the deals he was closing, I observed him with a mixture of pride and sadness. He was so sure of his world, so certain that material success was the only measure of worth. But I knew better. I had learned, through years of trials and quiet victories, that true gifts often went unnoticed at first. They required patience, understanding, and sometimes a moment of revelation that could shatter old assumptions and open the heart to new possibilities. The family gathered again for the midday meal, the table groaning under the weight of dishes both traditional and new. Laughter echoed once more, but the earlier tension lingered just beneath the surface, like a secret everyone was trying not to acknowledge. My eyes met Ethan's across the table, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of something unfamiliar. Curiosity? Regret? I held that moment in my mind, knowing it was the crack through which light might one day shine. As the afternoon unfolded, I remained quiet, watching and waiting, the secret of the gift's true meaning safely tucked away. This Thanksgiving was only just beginning, and I was ready to unveil the surprise that would change the course of our fractured relationship. But for now, I would endure the sting of dismissal, the coldness of mockery, and the weight of unspoken pain. Because sometimes, the hardest battles are fought not with words or anger, but with the quiet strength of a mother's love and the promise of a revelation that no one could ignore. The hours that followed Thanksgiving morning passed with a strange mixture of normalcy and undercurrents too subtle for most to detect. I moved through the house with quiet purpose, careful to keep the secret of the journal's true meaning locked safely away. Ethan's dismissive remarks echoed in my mind, but beneath the surface, a steady resolve took root. I found myself watching him more closely than before, noticing the little things, how he tapped his fingers impatiently when conversations dragged, the way his smile sometimes didn't quite reach his eyes, and how, despite the laughter, there was a restlessness in his movements. He was a man consumed by the world of numbers, deals, and appearances, but something, I sensed, remained unfulfilled. Claire, his wife, flitted about with practiced ease, orchestrating the gathering like a conductor leading a symphony. She was sharp, efficient, and, as I had come to understand, a formidable force in Ethan's life. Her smirks and whispered comments during the gift's unveiling had made it clear she shared his view of me as an outdated figure, clinging to sentimental gestures that didn't belong in their polished world. Yet, I refused to let their disdain define this moment or my place in Ethan's life. There was something beneath their judgments, a layer of vulnerability neither of them wanted to admit aloud. I intended to reach it, but on my own terms, and in my own time. As the afternoon waned, I discreetly pulled the journal from my bag and flipped through its pages. The leather cover was soft under my fingers, the embossed initials glinting faintly in the dim light. Inside, my carefully penned letter awaited, but more importantly, I had included blank pages. Pages meant for Ethan to fill with his thoughts, his dreams, his fears. I knew he rarely had time to pause, let alone reflect on the current swirling beneath his busy exterior. But this journal was more than a gift, it was an invitation. A quiet challenge to look inward, to find the parts of himself he'd hidden away beneath ambition and pride. Throughout the day, I played a subtle game of observation and restraint. I caught Claire's sharp glances when she thought no one was watching, and Ethan's occasional furrowed brow when a moment of silence settled between conversations. I could tell my presence was an irritation, a reminder of something inconvenient. But I didn't let that deter me. Instead, I cultivated patience, knowing that the surprise I had planned required the perfect moment, one that would catch Ethan off guard and make him reconsider everything. Small details became clues, like the way I kept the journal close, occasionally glancing at it as if it were an ordinary item, nothing special. I noticed Ethan's curiosity flicker when he caught sight of it, but he quickly dismissed it, turning back to the crowd with a forced laugh. In the quiet moments, I found myself reflecting on the years that had led to this day. How often had I tried to reach him with words that fell flat or gestures that missed their mark? How many times had I swallowed the disappointment of being misunderstood or overlooked? This Thanksgiving was my chance to rewrite that story, not with confrontation or anger, but with a revelation that would speak louder than words. The surprise was still concealed, wrapped in layers of meaning and intention, waiting for the moment to emerge. As evening approached, the family gathered again in the living room. The clatter of dishes and the murmur of conversation created a backdrop that felt both comforting and tense. I settled into a chair, the journal resting discreetly on my lap, its presence a silent promise. Ethan joined the group, his posture relaxed but his eyes scanning the room, as if searching for something he couldn't name. When his gaze met mine, a flicker of recognition passed between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of the distance and the possibility that lingered in the air. I caught a glimpse of Claire leaning toward him, whispering something with a smirk that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan's smile tightened, and I sensed the invisible walls they both kept firmly in place. Yet, amid the undercurrents of tension, there was also an unspoken hope. I could feel it like a fragile thread weaving through the room, a possibility that this Thanksgiving might be more than just another gathering marked by silence and misunderstanding. Throughout the evening, I maintained a careful balance, engaging in light conversation, sharing smiles that masked the storm within. I observed Ethan's interactions, noting how his laughter sometimes faltered, how his eyes lingered on the journal when he thought no one was watching. The suspense built quietly, like the slow gathering of clouds before a storm. I knew the surprise would come at the right moment, not out of spite or a desire to prove a point, but as a bridge to something deeper, something that could heal the fractures between us. As the family prepared to transition from dinner to the customary post-meal relaxation, I felt the weight of the moment settling around me. The journal was more than an object, it was a symbol of my hope, my love, and my belief that beneath Ethan's bravado lay a heart waiting to be reached. I caught his eye once more and gave a subtle nod, a silent promise that the surprise was not just a gift, but a beginning. Ethan's expression shifted, curiosity piqued, though he masked it quickly behind a casual shrug. The rest of the evening unfolded with the usual mix of stories, laughter, and quiet exchanges. Yet, beneath the surface, a tension pulsed, a tension I had cultivated with care, knowing it would lead to the moment when the surprise would be unveiled. In the solitude of my room later that night, I reviewed the plan one last time. The journal held secrets, yes, but also the key to a new chapter in our relationship. Ethan's mocking words had been a catalyst, but they did not define the outcome. I was ready to reveal the surprise when the time was right, to watch as the walls Ethan had built around his heart began to crumble, replaced by something genuine and unguarded. This was not just about a gift, it was about reclaiming the bond that had frayed over the years, about reminding my son that love and understanding could exist beyond the superficial measures of success. And so, I waited, patiently and deliberately, for the moment when the surprise would shine through the shadows of doubt and misunderstanding, illuminating a path toward reconciliation and hope. As the evening deepened, the family's chatter began to mellow, and the room grew quieter, the distractions of the day giving way to a softer, more intimate atmosphere. It was the moment I had been waiting for, the perfect time to unveil the surprise I'd kept close to my heart. I reached slowly for the journal resting on my lap, feeling the familiar texture of the leather cover beneath my fingers, its weight a reminder of the meaning it carried. Ethan was seated across from me, surrounded by relatives who had gradually drifted away into smaller conversations or had begun to leave for the night. His sharp eyes momentarily flickered to the journal, a mix of curiosity and skepticism playing across his features. The dismissive arrogance of earlier had softened, replaced by something I hadn't seen before, a flicker of uncertainty. I took a deep breath, steadying the flutter of nerves that had settled in my chest. This was more than a moment of revelation, it was the chance to bridge a gap that had grown wider than I ever wanted. I cleared my throat gently, drawing Ethan's attention. "Ethan," I began, my voice calm but carrying the weight of everything I wanted to say, "there's something I need to show you, something I hope will mean more than just a gift." He raised an eyebrow, the skepticism still there but tempered by a faint glow of interest. I opened the journal carefully, flipping to the first page where my letter was written in neat, flowing script. "I know this might not seem like much to you, I said softly, but this journal is more than paper and ink. It's a space for you, to think, to dream, to remember who you are beneath all the noise of your busy life. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he read the first few lines silently. I watched the transformation unfold, the mocking smirk fading, replaced by a furrowed brow and then something like recognition. His hands paused, lingering over the pages as if unsure how to handle the unexpected weight of my words. I continued, I wrote about the things I've seen in you, the strength, the kindness, even the moments you don't believe in yourself. This isn't about stocks or success, it's about you, Ethan. The parts that don't show up in boardrooms or emails. The room felt charged, the air thick with unspoken emotions. I saw the walls around Ethan's heart begin to crack, tiny fissures letting in light. For a long moment, he said nothing, his gaze fixed on the journal as if seeing it for the first time. Then, quietly, he looked up at me, his eyes searching. I never knew you felt all this, he admitted, voice low and hesitant. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. There's so much I want you to know, about how proud I am of you, about the dreams I have for you beyond what the world sees. The family, who had been watching in silence, seemed to hold its collective breath. Ethan's usual bravado was replaced by a vulnerability that startled everyone, including me. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, his lips twitched into the barest hint of a smile. This is something else, he said softly, tracing the embossed initials on the cover with his finger. I didn't expect this. The surprise on his face was genuine, a crack in the armor he wore so well. The journal, a simple object to some, had become a mirror reflecting the parts of himself he'd long ignored. Claire, seated beside him, glanced between us, her expression unreadable but quieter than before. Even she seemed to recognize that this moment was significant. As Ethan flipped through the pages, I saw the tension in his shoulders ease, the tightness in his jaw soften. His eyes met mine again, this time with something closer to gratitude. I guess I've been too caught up to see what really matters, he murmured. Maybe this is a reminder I needed. The family around us exhaled, the atmosphere shifting from one of discomfort to hope. The barriers between mother and son, once so rigid, began to crumble under the weight of understanding and the power of a thoughtful gesture. For the first time that day, Ethan's laughter was genuine, not forced or hollow. He closed the journal and looked at me with renewed warmth. Thank you, Mom. This means more than I can say. In that moment, I felt a surge of relief and pride. The surprise had done more than stun him, it had opened a door. Our relationship, strained and distant, was beginning to heal. As the evening wore on, Ethan shared stories from his past, moments of doubt and hope that he rarely voiced aloud. Our conversation deepened, the walls between us dissolving with every word. I realized then that the gift was never about the journal itself, but the connection it represented, the chance to be seen and understood beyond the surface. The family watched the transformation, their smiles reflecting the shift in our dynamic. What had begun as a tense, awkward Thanksgiving was becoming a turning point, a new chapter written not with anger or resentment, but with empathy and love. Ethan's jaw had dropped, not from disbelief or mockery, but from the surprise of being truly seen, of finally receiving a gift that spoke to his soul rather than his status. And as I looked at him, laughing and sharing with an openness I hadn't witnessed in years, I knew this was only the beginning of a journey toward reconciliation and deeper understanding. The room was quieter now, the earlier laughter and chatter having softened into a calm that felt almost sacred. Ethan sat beside me, the journal resting on his lap, its leather cover warm beneath his hands. The surprise I had unveiled moments before had shifted the entire atmosphere, peeling back layers of tension that had long hung over our family gatherings like a heavy fog. He looked at me, eyes searching, vulnerable in a way I hadn't seen for years. Mom, he began hesitantly, voice low and tentative, I owe you an apology. I was harsh earlier, dismissive. I didn't realize how much this meant to you, or to me. His words hung in the air, fragile yet profound. The son I had raised, the man who had often seemed so distant and guarded, was beginning to open a door I had thought permanently shut. I reached out and gently squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of connection spreading like sunlight through a room long shadowed by misunderstanding. "I've been hard on you too," I admitted softly. "Maybe harder than I realized." We both lost sight of what really matters. Ethan nodded, the weight of unspoken regrets evident in his eyes. "I guess I was caught up in proving myself, in living up to expectations, yours, mine, the world's. I forgot to pause, to remember who I really am beneath all that." We sat together, the quiet space between us filled with a newfound honesty. The journal, once a symbol of tension and dismissal, had become a bridge, a means to reconnect and uncover truths buried beneath years of pride and silence. Our conversation deepened, peeling back layers of frustration and misunderstanding. Ethan shared moments of doubt he'd never voiced before, fears of inadequacy hidden beneath his confident exterior. I listened, heart swelling with empathy and relief. "I always wanted you to succeed," I confessed. "But I see now that success isn't just about achievements or status. It's about being true to yourself and those you love." Ethan's gaze softened. "And I see now that sometimes I pushed you away because I was scared of not living up to the image I thought I had to maintain." The vulnerability between us was a fragile gift, one I cherished with all my heart. In that moment, the barriers that had separated mother and son began to crumble, replaced by understanding and forgiveness. Around us, the family watched quietly, sensing the shift. The tension that had marked the day was dissolving, replaced by warmth and hope. Claire, who had earlier worn a mask of superiority, softened slightly, as if recognizing the sincerity unfolding before her. Ethan took a deep breath and, with a tentative smile, said, "Thank you for not giving up on me, Mom. For seeing me, even when I didn't see myself." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away, focusing on the moment. "I never gave up. I never will. We're family, and that means more than anything." We talked for hours, sharing stories, regrets, and hopes for the future. The journal became a symbol of our renewed bond, a reminder that beneath the surface, love endured despite the scars and misunderstandings. Ethan admitted that he wanted to start writing in the journal, not just as a way to reflect, but as a means to reconnect with parts of himself he'd neglected. I promised to be there, not as a critic or a distant observer, but as a mother who loved him unconditionally. In the quiet hum of that evening, I felt a profound sense of healing. The conflict that had threatened to define our relationship was dissolving, replaced by the possibility of a deeper, more honest connection. The family's atmosphere shifted as well. Conversations flowed more freely, smiles came easier, and the warmth of genuine understanding filled the room. It was as if the surprise I had unveiled had unlocked not just my son's heart, but the hearts of everyone present. Ethan's transformation was subtle but powerful. The arrogance and dismissal had given way to humility and gratitude. He reached out to me more often that night, his gestures small but sincere, a hand on my shoulder, a shared glance, a quiet word of thanks. As the evening drew to a close, I found myself reflecting on the journey we had taken in just a few hours. The path from mockery to remorse and understanding had been difficult, but it was a path worth walking. I realized that true reconciliation requires more than apologies, it demands openness, vulnerability, and the willingness to see beyond pride and pain. Our conversation had planted seeds of hope, promising a future where we could rebuild trust and affection. Ethan's remorse was genuine, but it was his readiness to understand and grow that gave me the greatest hope. I saw in him the man he was becoming, a man capable of reflection, humility, and love. And I saw in myself the mother I aspired to be, patient, forgiving, and fiercely devoted. That night, as we said goodnight and the house grew still, I felt a quiet joy settle in my heart. The surprise had done more than break down walls, it had opened a door to healing and renewed family bonds. It was a reminder that even the deepest wounds can begin to mend when met with patience, love, and the courage to embrace truth. As I prepared for bed, I knew that this Thanksgiving would be remembered not for the tension or the mockery, but for the moment when we chose understanding over pride, connection over distance. And that choice, I believed, would guide us toward a future filled with hope and reconciliation. The next Thanksgiving arrived with a gentle warmth that mirrored the new chapter we had begun to write the year before. The house was filled with the sounds of laughter and the rich aromas of traditional dishes, but this time, the atmosphere was different, lighter, more genuine, and threaded with a renewed sense of connection. As I moved through the crowd, exchanging smiles and warm greetings, I felt a profound peace settle in my heart. Ethan was at the center of the gathering, but the tension that once shadowed his presence was gone. His interactions were open and sincere, his laughter full and unguarded. The journal I had gifted him was no longer a symbol of distance but a bridge that had brought us closer, its pages now filled with his thoughts, reflections, and dreams. As the family gathered around the table, sharing stories and memories, I found a quiet moment to reflect on the journey that had brought us here. The surprise I had unveiled last year had sparked a transformation, not only in Ethan but in all of us. It reminded me that true gifts go beyond material value, they are expressions of understanding, patience, and love that can mend even the most fractured bonds. My sister leaned in, whispering, "I never thought I'd see Ethan like this. It's like he's a different man." I smiled, nodding. Sometimes it takes a moment of vulnerability to remind us who we really are. Grandchildren ran through the rooms, their laughter echoing like a promise of hope and continuity. Claire, who had once been so guarded and aloof, now joined in the conversations with genuine warmth, her earlier sharpness softened by the healing that had unfolded within the family. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan approached me with a gentle smile and handed me a small, wrapped package. "I wanted to give you something," he said softly. I unwrapped it to find a beautifully crafted pendant, delicate and timeless. "It's for you," he explained. "A reminder of our journey and the bond we've rebuilt." Tears pricked my eyes as I clasped the pendant around my neck. "Thank you, Ethan. This means the world to me." The evening continued with shared laughter, stories, and the kind of warmth that only comes from hearts open and healed. I watched as the family celebrated not just the holiday, but the renewed connections that had taken root and blossomed. In that moment, I understood that the surprise I had once planned was never really about proving a point or seeking validation. It was about love, the kind of love that patiently waits, that forgives, and that transforms pain into strength. As the night wore on and the family slowly dispersed, I stood by the window, the pendant resting against my heart. The journey from mockery to gratitude had been long and winding, but it had led us here, to a place of hope, understanding, and renewed family bonds. I looked forward to many more holidays filled with genuine connection, knowing that the true gift we share is the love that binds us, the patience that heals us, and the surprises that remind us of the strength found in forgiveness. This Thanksgiving, and every one to come, would be a testament to the power of thoughtful gestures and the enduring strength of family. If you loved the story, like the video and subscribe.